You're listening to the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Well, welcome back in, everybody. Time in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios, 4:15. Crazy weekend of college football, and it's going to get even better this upcoming weekend. Conference Championship Week. Temple in their conference championship game against Navy. Penn State in the Big Ten championship game with college football playoff aspirations. What a turnaround for Penn State. And oh, yeah, by the way, you had a great rivalry with a great game this past weekend, Michigan and Ohio State. And now joining us is the preeminent college football voice in America, and that's Chris Fowler, who's kind enough to give us a few minutes right now. Chris, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
Good to talk to you, Zach. Yeah, thanks. Congratulations on the gig there. I look forward to it.
Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate those kind remarks. All right, let's get to the game, though, that everyone was talking about over this weekend, and that was the spot in the game you were broadcasting between Michigan and Ohio State. Do you think the officials got it right?
Well, I think that you could never reverse the spot. I mean, it's impossible to decide a game on an inconclusive replay. I've often thought, Zach, that spotting is one of the least precise, most frustrating, most human elements in officiating, and every official I talk to agrees. You know, they kind of run in from the side and they put the ball down, and then games are decided based on a couple of inches either direction. I didn't see a replay that indicated the spot was bad. If you're on the Michigan side, you can view it through that lens. The Ohio State side, you're convinced he made it. I'm straight down the middle, couldn't care less who wins, but I didn't see anything. We had 50 cameras at the game, and you may not have the perfect angle right down the 15-yard line, and Barrett had his back to the near sideline anyway, so even if you had a camera right there, it probably wouldn't have shown it definitively. I know it's clear in Jim Harbaugh's mind based on his post-game rant, and a lot of Michigan fans are convinced that he didn't get there. I think the initial spot was decent, and there's no way they could review it, but man, they'll be talking about that for decades.
No question about that. It was a classic game. I thought he was short, but I do agree with you. Once they had that ruling of a first down, I thought there would be no way that they would overturn it. Really, if you're Michigan, though, that one got away from them. And a big reason why is because of their quarterback in Spade. You just look at that fumble at the 1 and then also the pick 6. That's what really, to me, cost Michigan that football game, Chris.
I think Spade was actually pretty remarkable, though. When you consider the kind of injury he had, and they never really revealed exactly what it was, but I would presume, I'm just a guess, that it was an AC joint thing and not a collarbone, but maybe we'll find out differently. In any case, the dude hadn't taken snaps, hadn't really under center especially, which causes pain. I mean, if you'd have told me he has 3 turnovers, I'd say it's a terrible game. But the way that he managed the offense, the way that he allowed them to be more complex than it would have been if O'Korn had been in there, I thought at times he played a hell of a game. The fumble snap didn't end up costing him because they got the ball back after the fake punt decision and went down and scored. So, in the end, that didn't cost him a ton of points. The second interception that he threw was a killer. That was a killer. But you know what? Yeah, maybe you put that on the coaching staff. He's dropping back in there, and they're rolling the dice and asking him to make throws over the middle when you're pinned way back, protecting a lead. Maybe if they'd been able to run the ball at all, then maybe you could run it, punt it, and do the conventional thing. They put trust in him. He made a bad mistake on the second pick, and that was huge. But I think Spade overall played a pretty good game considering.
Michigan dominant all year long, and now they're going to probably be on the outside looking in when it comes to those Final Four teams. And this is a week and the week after this, where everyone's going to be sitting there and saying who's going to be the third team, who's going to be the fourth team in the college football playoff. Do you think we could eventually see expansion one day, and how far do you think we are from expanding this college football playoff?
I think a long way, actually. I think that the 4-team bracket, some people see it as a half measure, but I'd like to see how it works for a number of years before I, start clamoring for an expansion to an 8-team bracket. If you're going to do 8 teams, I honestly think you got to eliminate the conference championship games. You got to take that tier out of it. You can't simply continue to add games onto the end of the season. I've seen the wear and tear. It's round 15 for the teams that get in that championship game, and to ask you to play a 16th game, I'm sort of with the players on that. I think that if you eliminated conference championship games as being unnecessary in an 8-team format, then maybe you'd create some excitement. But, listen, this is never supposed to be easy. It's never easy choosing 4 teams. The committee got off pretty easy last year. In year one, there were some tough choices to make, but ultimately I think they made the right ones. This year, it's potentially really controversial. I'm just waiting for the 2-loss Big Ten champ to demand a place at the table. And the dynamic of that room is interesting because Barry Alvarez, athletic director at Wisconsin. Let's say Wisconsin wins, for example. He's athletic director. He's not allowed to technically discuss them, but he's a very loud and prominent voice in that committee room throughout his entire tenure. And I don't know. A 2-loss Big Ten champ would be argued against for potentially a 1-loss Washington, and any other contending teams in there. It'll be pretty clear to me if Alabama and Clemson win their conference championship games, they're going to get in. I cannot see Ohio State getting dropped. I just cannot see them going from 2 to 5 after beating Michigan. I think the committee's pretty clear on their resume and where they stand. And the question to me would be Washington versus a Pac-10 champion if Washington wins, and Oklahoma/Oklahoma State, the winner of Bedlam, with the Sooners having a better case. That's the other team in the conversation.
Let's just say, though, the first 3 are in no order: Bama, Clemson, Ohio State. If it comes down to Big Ten or Washington, I know you say it's a tough decision, and clearly it is. Do they favor the Big Ten team, or do they go Washington at the end of the day?
Well, I think we're going to learn more when the rankings come out tomorrow. I mean, we'll see how good they feel about Washington. If you're ranking Washington before they've won a conference title, but they won their division ahead of the Big Ten teams who are in the same position, then are you going to flip them at the end and say, oh, you know what? In the end, the Big Ten title means more than the Pac-12 title. I have a problem with that. Colorado, their opponent, a top 10 team, and has been for a couple of weeks now in these rankings. So what they think of the Buffs is pretty obvious. But again, there's that Big Ten lobbying factor. The Pac-12 excluded last year would feel pretty scalded, even though Washington played a very soft non-conference schedule. So the rationale would be all those strength of schedules, the metrics they would use, that Washington would be punished for who they played pre-Pac-12. Pac-12 plays 9 conference games. Washington had the 1 loss at home to USC, but played a difficult conference schedule. But again, they didn't challenge themselves. They didn't schedule non-conference games that are up to the par of that program. And if they don't get in, that'll be the decisive factor.
Now, how about your alma mater? You think they got a chance this weekend against Washington?
Yeah, sure. Their defense has been continually a huge surprise. Jim Leavitt, tremendous hire as defensive coordinator. They've been able to score for a couple of years. The pitch and catch is tremendous. Their offense is difficult to stop. You saw the 28 points they put on Michigan, and there was no fluke in any of that. So the X factor was the defense. They haven't been able to run and tackle the Pac-12 offenses forever since they got into the league, but that's changed this year. Their defensive efficiency is really, really high, to use one of the metrics, and they'll have to be on their game because the way the Huskies' offense is humming, and they're favorites for a reason. I hope that Colorado goes in there and it plays loose and enjoys it. Maybe if Washington gets in the playoff, Colorado would still be in the Rose Bowl conversation. It would come down to them or USC, whatever team is ranked higher by the committee, and they might go with USC. So you're talking about Colorado team that has a lot on the line after the season they've had. They're even talking in Boulder about the playoff, believe it or not, thinking that why couldn't they make a case if they beat Washington? If some other things happened, they could find themselves in the mix, and then others are like, oh, wait a second. Be careful what you wish for. You really want to go in the playoff as that number 4 team? You think you're ready for Alabama? I mean, I don't know. Part of me says it's been a tremendous run, and just from the CU fan perspective, be really, really happy if you can win the division and then win the conference and go to the Rose Bowl. Don't worry about Alabama and all that stuff. Wait till you get a few more big bodies on the roster.
Hey, Chris Fowler with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920. The Jersey is a Temple fan. When you look ahead like that as well, I totally understand what the Colorado fan, though, is saying. Let me just ask you this, though. Let's get to Penn State, because I remember when Temple played Penn State this year, leading up to that game, people were talking about possibly James Franklin being fired if he was to lose to Temple again. And then even after that Temple game, people weren't that high in State College on James Franklin. You did the game. That block kick, it changed the complete narrative nationally of Penn State. Just how about the turnaround of Penn State with James Franklin as the head coach?
One of the most incredible one-play turnarounds I've ever seen in a season. Because I was in State College going into that game. Didn't give them a great chance of beating Ohio State unless the atmosphere gave them added inspiration. They got, Kabinda and Bell back, two of their key players and defense linebackers that just make play after play. They got them back healthy, which I thought was very important for the Ohio State game. That was a big part of the turnaround as well, was getting some of the injured bodies back because they were just destroyed early in the season, as you know. Let me say this, though, Zach. Franklin was never truly on the hot seat. I haven't said this on shows. I'm pretty plugged into that program. There were some big donors that didn't like him. They tried to push for another direction, and they were shown the door. The Penn State administration was not receptive to overtures from these donors to have him removed. There's one super big donor that you want to have on your side at Penn State, and Franklin did and does. So I don't think his job was in danger. I really don't believe that. I mean, that was sort of the national narrative. You're right. I think that, the turnaround obviously has re-scripted everything. It's a high water mark for them post-scandal, post-sanctions, to say the least. And it's remarkable how McSorley has grown. The offense has become really dynamic, really diverse, really hard to stop as the quarterback has gained and developed and grown confidence. And the defense, which was nasty when all those pieces were healthy. They have a nasty pass rush. They have excellent linebackers. They're tough to throw on. I'm really interested to see how they're going to respond against Wisconsin. I give them a great chance, to beat the Badgers. I think it's a really compelling game. It's going to be on head-to-head against the game that I'm working. But I promise you I'll have my eye up on the monitor there, and I'll go back and watch it because I think it's a really interesting matchup. I'm sure the Penn State fans are pretty unhinged at the idea of going and playing for a Big Ten title and having a chance to battle for the playoff conversation. Where they were a month and a half ago, didn't have a chance in hell of being in that conversation, yet here they are.
Hey, the beauty of DVR from you get to broadcast games, and then you eventually get to catch up with the other ones later.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's the best thing. I just learned out the other day that you could actually deposit a check from your cell phone. So technology, even me at 22 years old, it's absolutely ridiculous now. You can see everything going on in the world. Let me just ask you this, though, before we get you on out of here, as Chris Fowler joins us right now. Western Michigan or the American Athletic Conference champ? Who gets that spot in the Cotton Bowl?
There's a question of deep interest to Temple fans and the Navy
just
fans.
A little bit.
Yeah, I think that I have a hard time believing the Western's a better team than either Navy or Temple if they met head-to-head. But the record does speak loudly. I don't have a strong opinion when I do. To be honest with you, that's not something I've spent any time on. But what a great story it'd be if it were either Temple or Navy there. Western. To me, I think I would have the inside track, an undefeated season. But I think the American obviously is a really underrated conference, a much deeper conference than people realize. If you're talking about the fact that Houston's not even going to be in the game, and people had Houston as a playoff contender a couple weeks ago. So I think the fact that that Navy is strong, Temple, as I said on Twitter, last year was a really good season. I got a chance to spend some time with the Owls, as you know. This year, more impressive because it means it's a really good program. To have 1 year where everything comes together is terrific, but to do it back-to-back years, and especially if they can find a way to go to Annapolis and win the conference championship, really shows the strength of the program that Rule is building. Is there going to be some big-time players to replace next year? Absolutely, but I think that Temple's in a really good position, and I think if you're a neutral like me, you have to love what Navy's been able to do. I think they punted the ball twice in the month of November, if I'm not mistaken. So
no, that's right.
Temple may have the kind of defense that can deal with it, discipline on defense, and then also be able to chew clock with their own running game and ball control offense to keep Navy off the field, to do to Navy what Navy does to other people. I mean, for me, I'm going to be dialed in at noon watching that championship game. It's a really compelling matchup.
Just as someone, and I agree with what you had to say, I thought this year was more impressive than last year for the Temple Owls. Matt Rule building a consistent program at Temple, building off the foundations and having a new spin to it than what Al Golden did, some of those similar traditions. Just being around that Temple team last year, what were your impressions of Matt Rule when you left that crazy day, October 31st at the Link?
No, I think that he's got what you look for in a coach. He connects with players. He's a really effective recruiter. He's very authentic. He's real, which players respond to, and they can sense it if you're not. Obviously, coming from a defensive background, I think is really cool, and I think he clearly knows what he's doing on that side of the ball. I like when a head coach is plugged in and has sort of an area of expertise that can shape the personality of the program. I think Matt's just a really, really, really top flight. I think of him as a young coach. Younger than I am anyway, so I think that the challenge, obviously, as you know, Zach, is you keep him to Temple because the offers will continue to come in, and you have to have a situation where he feels like he can achieve what he wants to. It's very tough to keep a coach when a Power 5 program comes calling and can throw resources at him, give him a chance to get into the playoff, which is a very, very tough thing to do coming out of the American. So. Whatever he decides to do for himself, I would respect that decision. If you're a Temple fan, you just hope you can hang on to him.
To me, if he was to leave tomorrow, I'd have no problem with it. As big of a loss as it would be, he did so much for this university, and he deserves that next chance. And he seems like he's very dedicated to this university, has a long commitment to it. His wife worked for the university, so it's going to take that right job for him to get away. But we just saw it this past weekend, and it kind of brings that back into reality with Texas getting Tom Herman. How about Herman be the new head coach of Texas?
Texas is a tough job. It's the most political job in college football, in my opinion. That comes from talking to plenty of guys who've had the job. The idea that it sits there in Austin, the state capital, that the boosters all believe that they're little junior Jerry Joneses, that they give some money to the school, and they now have the right to pick the coach and offer all kinds of input. Really, really difficult situation. Charlie Strong was mismatched from the beginning there. Wasn't a good fit. He knew it once he got there right away, if you want to be honest about it. They knew it too. And I just think that you have to be a politician. You have to embrace that part of the job. I don't know that that's inherently in Tom Herman's personality, but he's a super bright guy who can adapt to whatever he's thrown into, so I'm sure he will. But Mack Brown played it about as well as you can for as long as you can, and they finally got tired of him. And there's a guy that, won conference championships and won a national championship and recruited really well. He got stale. They got tired of him. And even his political skill couldn't save him in the end. I just don't think Texas is a job where you can stay for a real long time. Look at the history of the coaches there. Fired. I mean, nobody. It's not the kind of job that I guess you leave unless you're forced to leave, and that's pretty much what's happened to everyone who's coached there since Darrell Royal, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think he's an excellent coach who connects with players. The Tom Herman that I saw as an Ohio State assistant. From the guy who was then the head coach at Houston, totally different personality. He connected in a different way to those two jobs, and I'm sure it'll require that skill to adapt to Texas. But obviously, he knows what he's doing offensively, and he's a Texas native, so he knows the state. Should have a good relationship with the coaches there, and I'm sure that when the guy ahead of you was as unpopular as Charlie ended up being with the powers that be there, he'll be wholeheartedly embraced. But it's a very, very hard job to succeed in.
Chris, I know you got to run, but last one for Chris Fowler. A Heisman Trophy presentation. Who are your top three for the Heisman? This is going to be a very close voting.
Yeah, I've covered the thing for about 30 years and hosted it for about 22 of them. I've never seen a Heisman race, frankly, that's less talked about. I've never been more confused about how to fill out my ballot. You start circling back to the guys that are great players that maybe statistically haven't had as great a season as they did last year, guys like McCaffrey. But, Lamar Jackson is backed up to the field. When you're a quarterback and you lose your last two games, okay, it's not all on him, but some of it's on him. When you reap the success as a quarterback of what your team has done, you have to bear some of the responsibility in a disproportionate way also. So, yeah, I think he's a brilliant player. I still think he's got a chance to win, but I think it's actually become pretty open. And guys like Deshaun Watson who have a chance to make a closing argument against Virginia Tech, I think he comes back into the running. Peppers didn't have that transcendent moment against Ohio State that could have boosted his candidacy. Made some plays. Is without a doubt. I think he's like a decathlete. He does everything well. I don't think he's the best at his position, but there just wasn't that moment on Saturday. Would you agree? Where he did what he did, what Desmond did, or he didn't do what Charles Woodson did. He didn't take a punt back for a touchdown. He didn't have a big pick six. He didn't have a play on offense that was unforgettable. So he didn't have the chance to get to grab that Heisman moment that could have put him in the driver's seat. So I think it's very open. I think it's going to be some suspense. I don't think it's the most talked about or exciting Heisman race, but we'll see.
Chris, you're a great broadcaster. You've been very kind to me over the years. You're a better person. Appreciate the time today. Thanks so much for coming on.
All right, Zach. Continued success. We'll talk again. Bye.
Thanks so much. Chris Fowler joining us. And the reason I say that is because when I did the Temple Notre Dame game last year, I got Chris Fowler's phone number, and I send him a text message, and I say, Chris, Zach Gelb, at the time I was with WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. That's the professional way I said it, basically the Temple student-run radio station. And I said, big game coming up. You're doing the game Saturday, October 31st. Any chance we could get you on for 10 minutes? He calls me back, and he goes, not only can I give you more than 10 minutes, I'll come down to the studio. So I went out to Edberg Olson Hall, which was 2 or 3 blocks from where our studio was on Temple's campus. I picked up Chris, and Chris asked me to give him like a tour of the university. So I'm showing him around the university, walking around campus. Everyone's going, is that Chris Fowler? Yeah, that's Chris Fowler. Then he comes into the WHIP studios, did about 20, 25 minutes on the air, and man, I love listening to him. I tweeted it out during Michigan-Ohio State. When you just hear his voice, you know there's a big-time college football game. Now, in terms of what we talked about, Bama's going to beat Florida. Clemson's going to beat Virginia Tech. Ohio State is going to be in. Those are 3 teams. Big Ten winner, Penn State or Wisconsin, or Washington, assuming they hold on and beat Colorado. Tomorrow's going to be very telling where they rank the Big Ten, because he's right. If they have Washington as the 4th best team this week and not a Big Ten team, I don't see how then the following week you could just say, oh, well, we're going to have the Big Ten team usurp Washington. I believe ultimately the winner of the Big Ten championship game will be playing Alabama. You'll have Clemson and Ohio State, Bama, and the Big Ten champion. Now, in terms of Temple, Western Michigan, I believe, is going to go to the Cotton Bowl, assuming they beat Ohio. Navy has a better chance to get past Western Michigan for that Cotton Bowl spot. Temple, because of the loss early in the season to Army, I think that will kill them. And also the Memphis loss. That could kill them for getting to the Cotton Bowl. I do believe Navy and Temple are better teams, though, than Western Michigan, even though Western Michigan is undefeated, because that AAC conference is so underrated. And with my point about Matt Rule, and I tweeted this over the weekend when I saw the tweets, Tom Herman going to Texas. By the way, clearly his agent, and there was that story, LSU, they had the contract agreed upon, and then he wanted to talk to Texas, and LSU basically said, go screw yourself. The deal's off the table. We have a coach that wants to be here. That's Coach O. Herman always wanted to go to Texas. There's no doubt about that in my mind that LSU was just a bargaining chip for his agent to Texas. Put a little pressure on Texas. When they had the support for Charlie Strong, get rid of Charlie Strong, we'll bring in Tom Herman. I did tweet out, though, when Herman went there, that as long as you are a head coach that provided something to that university, You want to take a bigger job, I'm okay with it. For example, Steve Addazio has been very kind to me. When Steve Addazio left Temple, he didn't really do much for Temple. That's why it's fair for fans to be irate about that. It ended up being the best thing to happen to Temple because they got Matt Rule. My point with Matt Rule, look at what he's accomplished at Temple. Last year, college game day beat Penn State. This year, back in the American Athletic Conference Championship game, has a very good chance to win the conference championship game this upcoming weekend. If he wanted to leave after this year, I'm fine with that because he gave something to this university. If he wants to go, sure. I think he's going to stay after this year. I do. I think he's going to be around a lot longer than people expect. I'm not naive. That's not just me being a Temple alumni. That's just the feel I get. For someone that's been around him for a long time, that is the feel that I get with Matt Rule. 609-919-9200. This is the Zach Gelb Show. I cannot wait for that game, by the way, this upcoming weekend. Temple and Navy. Navy's offense, exceptional. Will Worth, the quarterback, replaced the injured quarterback this year. In last 7 games has over 1,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. That triple option has been the kryptonite for the Temple Owls. We'll see what happens this Saturday in Annapolis, Maryland. What we'll do right now is we'll take a quick break on the Zach Gelb Show. Time right now in the Princeton Orthopedic Associates Studios, 441. We'll come back, and when we get back, we'll talk Eagles and your phone calls. Get on board right now, 609-919-9200. More of the Zach Gelb Show when we come back.